Today's daf is daf Tes, one of the most famous dafim in all of Shas. And we start with Omer Rabbi Lazar. Omer Pesach Pasuch Matzasi, Neman Liosra Olaf. So a man gets married, and the chazak is that she's a Pesua. And after the Bila Rishona, he claims that he found her Pesach to be Pasuach, that she's not a Pesua. She completely denies it, and she says no, she didn't have any relationship with another man. Neman Liosra Olaf. He's believed on himself to generate an Isur Tumah of Vehi Nitmes, and he has to divorce her. He's not allowed to live with her because if she had a bia, then perhaps she had a bia after the Erisin, and that's Nus after the Erisin would generate an Isur Olav, Echel Lebal, Echel Leboa. And even though there are no witnesses that she had this Maisis Nus, and there's no real way of clarifying it with Eidim, nevertheless, a person is believed on himself, and that's called Shavia Nafshe Chaticha D'Isur. So a person can take upon himself an Isur. So Gemara asks, "Mai Sfek Svekavu?" Is a double suffix. Number one, suffix Tachtov, suffix Ein Tachtov. We don't know if the Bia took place before or after the Erisin. The Af Im Timtza Lomar Shezinza Tachtov, suffix Bionis, suffix Beratzon. If the Bia was Ba'ones, then Einen Eser Sal Baila, Torah says, Vehi Lo Nitfasa, Ha Nitfasa, Asura. Suffix Beratzon, maybe she had Ratzon. So we have a Sfek Sveka. The Torah teaches us that Sfek Sveka is Lakula. One suffix is Lakuma, but a double suffix, Sfek Sveka, is Lakula. Lo Tzricha, when does Rabbi Lazar's ruling apply? Only be Ashes Cohen, because there the only question is Tachtov or Lo Tachtov. As far as Baraton or Ba'ones, it makes no difference, because even if it was Ba'ones, she's a Sural al Cohen. Ibai Sema be Ashes Yisrael. How would you have only one suffix in the case of an Ashes? Going to Kibul Ba'avua Kiduchea Chusa Mibes Mibash Shon V'Yomer. The father had married her off before she was 3 years old, and therefore, if we have a principle that if she had a be'ilah, then besuleh chosrin, and the fact that he finds a pesach pasuch means that certainly she had this nus after she reached the age of 3 years old, and she was already after kiddushin at that time. So the only suffix we have here is whether it was ones or ratzon. So basically, to summarize, the din of Rabbi Lazar, Pesach Pasuach Matosin Neman Liosra, applies in two situations. Number one, in a case of an Ashes Kohen. Number two, in the case of Ashes Yisrael, Shem Iskadjal Yidei Avia, Chusa Mibash Shalosh Shonim. And the Chiddush Rabbi Lazar is that even though there are no Eidim, that she had this Nus relationship, but nevertheless, Adam Neman Lahayid, the lesser osal atzmo b'din shavia nafshei chatif nisur. Whereas my kamashmalan, why do I need Rabbi Lazar to teach me shavia nafshei without Eidim? Tanina, we learned it already. Omer leisha kidash tich. He says in front of two Eidim, I married you, and those Eidim went to Medina Sayyam. They're not around. He omer lo kidash tani, and she denies that claim. What's the law in such a case? He muteres b'krovav, but who also b'krovasev. Let's start back. He's not allowed to marry any of her relatives because, by virtue of his own confession of Shavia Nafshei Chaticha D'Isura, these are relatives of his wife, because he claims Kiddush Tani. She, on the other hand, is not bound by his Nemonis al Atzmo, as long as there are no Eidim. Therefore, we don't assume from her perspective that he was married to her. Therefore, she's allowed to marry his relatives. So we already see a precedent here of Shavia Nafshei Chaticha D'Isur. Why do I need the Chiddush of Rabbi Lazar? Ma'od Tema If not for Rabbi Elazar, I would have said Hasam in the case of Kedushin. There he could answer her on himself, even without aiding the Vade Kimle. He certainly knows that he was Makadisha. He's not confused about it. Aval Hacha, but here, Pesach Pasuach, make him Hudalo Kimle. He was a single fellow. He has no experience. He thinks he found the Pesach Pasuach, but he's not a Baki. He's not an expert. We don't know if he found the Pesach Pasuach. Maybe the Pesach was no. She wasn't Mizana. Kamash Malon, Rabbi Elazar says no. If he's claiming that he knows with all certainty that she had a Pesach Pasuach, then Shavia Nafshech Hatita Disura, and even though he's not a Baki, he's believed to Asra on himself. Gemara raises the following question: Mi Amar Rabbi Elazar Hachi? Did Rabbi Elazar actually say that a woman is Asura al Baila based on his edus when he testifies? Pesach Pasuach Matzasi, she's Asura Olav. But Amar Rabbi Elazar Eino Isha Neseres al Baila El Aliske Kini Vestira Ma'aser Shahaya. The only way you can generate an Isser of an Ich al Baila is after Kinui, when he said to Al Tisri Al Tisyachti Imploni. And then two witnesses testified she violated the Kinui. She had a private, shall I say, rendezvous with this person. And that's called stira. So he warned her, don't go into a private place with so-and-so, and that's called kinui. And then she violated that kinui and went into a private place with so-and-so. Under those circumstances that we have Edi, Kini, and Stira, although they didn't see the Bia, the Torah relies on the, shall we say, likelihood that she had the Bia, and she's Asur al Baila. Batsheva was the wife of Uriah Chiti. There are no witnesses that she was Mizana. There was no Kini and Stira. And Eina Neseres. So you see clearly that unless it's Kini and Stira, Eina Isha Neseres al Baila. In the absence of Aden. So why is she Asur al Baila, Neseres al Baila, Shetoin, Pesach B'tuch Matzasi, there are no Aden, there's no Kini and Stira. So the Gemara says, V'tizbra, how do you understand this statement of Rabbi Elazar? That from the story about Sheva, we can prove that you need Kini and Stira, no Ta'asra, Ma'aser Shahaya, V'Kini and Stira. When David had a relationship with Bathsheba, and Uriah Chiti was out in the battlefield, he didn't know that David was alone with her. So how can you say that there was a kinui? Now, since there was no kinui, how does Rebbe Elazar expect to quote this story as a proof text that Eino Isha Neseres al Bikini and Stira? The Ma'aser Shahaya of Bathsheba was without Kini and Stira. And furthermore, Miyasarua, did they prohibit Bathsheba? Even if we say that Uriah Chiti, let's say, gave Kini to Bathsheba before she had a private rendezvous with David, I still have a kasha because after Kini and Stira, an ishish be asura lebaila. Here, lo asura is Bathsheba leUriah, even after Nisra. It was only after the death of Uriah out in the battlefield, that's when David married Bathsheba. And therefore, we apply the principle of Geshem Chasura Lebal, Kach Asura Leboel. If she wasn't Asura Leboel, meaning David, then we have no choice but to assume that she wasn't Asura Uriah. So we have to assume there was no Kini and Stira. So the Gemara now reconciles the statement of Rabbi Elazar and says Holo Kasha. Rabbi Elazar didn't mean to say that Maisa de Batsheva hayu bikini and steer. That's not what he meant. On the contrary, Hachikam, Eino Isha Neseres al Baila Ela al Iskekini v'stira. Mimaisa Shahaya de la Vikini stira v'lo Asrua. From the fact that she was not Asura on Uriah or on David is because there was no Kini and stira. So you see that the only way you can generate an Isra of an Isha al Baila is after Kini and stira. Gemara says, Mikomagam Kasha, still have a stira, a contradiction between our sugya, in which Rabbi Elazar says, Neman liosra the tinus pesach patzus mitzasi, and yet Rabbi Elazar says, Kini and stira in, pesach pasuach lo, that the only way to asra al baila is through Kini and stira. Gemara answers, according to the logic of the Makshan, Kini and stira in? Are you really taking Rabbi Elazar literally that the only way of answering a woman al baila is through Kini and stira? But be'edim lo? I mean, what happens if two edim would testify that they saw this news? For sure should be asur al baila based on two edim. So you can't take Rabbi Elazar literally in saying that dafka and only with Kini and stira she's asur al baila. Ella, but rather we have no choice but to assume that Rabbi Elazar did not mean lafuki edim. And therefore, we could say that he didn't mean levute pesach basura. If it's borrower, if it's clear to the Baal that she had a be'ila with another man, that's equivalent to shnei eden. The hachikam, and this is what Rabbi Elazar was saying. Eina isha neseres al baila beid echad elu b'shnei eden. Kini and stira afilu beid echad nami is considered as if she had znus because it's reglayim l'dava. And Pesach Pasuach Kishnei Eden Dom. And the evidence of Pesach Pasuach is equal to that of Shnei Eden, because it's absolutely clear to him that she had another relationship. Therefore, she's Neseres. Now, what's the Afilu Beid Echad over here? It says, Eino Isha Neseres al Baila, Ela B'Shnei Eden. So here we have a principle called Ein Davar Shebe'er Pachas Mishnayim. But if there was Kini and stira in front of Edom, she denies that she had a yichud with so-and-so. And then she was Nesiachta Imo B'Fnei Edom, Afilu Beid Echad Nami. She had a kinui in front of two Eidim. And then there's an Eid Echad that testifies. Just 1 second. I'm sorry, there was kinui b'fnei shnei Eidim. And then there were another Eidim to testify that she violated the kinui with a steer and she was Nesiachta Imo. And now Eid Echad testifies Shenitma. So if the Eid Echad testifies that he witnessed the Maisa's Nitma, then she's Asura Baila Liolam and she doesn't drink from the main broth. V'chitema Maisa Shahoya. Ifnei Malo Asrua. Rabbi Elazar continues and he says, why wasn't she Batsheva Asura al David? There were many witnesses that he was alone with her. And Kishem Shasura Labal, Kach Asura Laboil. And the Gemara answers, Chasam Ones Hava. She did not approve and agree to have this beer. So David was Ba'aleh Balkarcha, and therefore Lo Nesra al Uriah, because Ashes Yisrael Shenensa Eino Neseres al Baila. And once we say that she's not Asur al Baila on Uriah, then she's not Asur al David. Ibai Sema. even without a tinus ones, that she was anusa, he still is muteris. Ihad Yomer of Shmuel bar Nachmeni Yomer Rab Yonason. Kol Yotzi Mulchemes Beis David get creases kos v'lishta.